Are there any Mac users in the audience? Everyone else did a show of hands. I figured it would be my turn. All right, so let's get the meeting going for the main topic, which is kind of I have a bunch of tips listed here, some are from a previous meeting, most of them are hopefully new, some of which I'll do spontaneously. The last time I did this topic, the tips were primarily focused on new features of Mountain Lion. This time I'm going to just do tips on Mac OS in general, so they won't be tied to a specific version of Mac OS. Most of them should apply for anyone on anything from 10.6 on up, and maybe even 10.5.8. I know there's a 10.5 user here, but they'll probably apply to that person as well. And a message just came up on my computer, and rather than just click OK, I decided to make that my first tip. Time Machine, when it first came out, it was really designed to work with one backup drive at a time. Over the years, I can't remember what version they added this in, whether it was Lion or Mountain Lion, but at one point along the way, they made it so they actually built the feature in where you can have multiple backup hard drives. And it would just back up to automatic, like let's say you had two backup hard drives and they were both plugged in. It would alternate between them. If they weren't both plugged in and you plugged one in 3 days later, the next backup would automatically go to that one since it hadn't backed up to that one in a while. So taking advantage of this feature, I have a Time Machine backup that is in my studio or home that backs up, of course, every hour when this machine is plugged in. Or at home. But I also have a portable USB drive that literally stays in my suitcase. And I take that one on the road, and whenever I'm in a hotel room and overnight, I'll plug that one in and let it back up to that one. So I'll always have at least 2 Time Machine backups, and more importantly, have a backup with me on the road. If you don't back up to one of those drives in 10 days, you'll start to get a warning like this. It'll pop up and say, Time Machine couldn't complete the backup to blank, whatever the drive is. Time Machine hasn't backed up your computer in 32 days. Well, that's not true. Time Machine hasn't backed up my computer to that drive in 32 days, but it's backed, my computer's backed up before I got here, this morning. So it just means that I've been home now for 32 days and I have not plugged this drive in since I've been home. That's all it means. But just the more to the case, the tip is, since drives are cheap, and since I'm paranoid about backing up, I don't believe in ever having my data in one place, and nowadays not even 2 places is good enough. I prefer to have my data in 3, 4, 5 places if I can, because it doesn't hurt anything to have extra copies. So the next time I go on the road, which will be next week, I'll plug that drive in. It'll start to back up and reset the clock for that drive to be another 10 days without going with the backup. Now, I'm going to open up the Time Machine preferences since it gives me that choice. And here is where the real story is happening. So if we look at it here, it backed up today at 1:16 a.m. So it did back up this morning, but it hasn't backed up to this drive since July 23rd. And you can add as many drives as you want. How did I get it to get bigger? That's another tip. I'll show you after I finish with this tip. I had another, now that wasn't the Time Machine tip that I talked about that I was going to show earlier when someone came up to me. But since that message came up, it let me do this tip first. So the next tip is actually one that I use all the time. And the question I got today that prompted me to show this tip was, she said her husband, she moved an important piece of data, her Lightroom catalog, to a separate drive, a new external drive. And she wanted to make sure that that new external drive was being backed up by Time Machine. Now, I don't know the rules of how Time Machine decides when to back up an external drive and when it doesn't. but I can tell you how you can check to make sure that it is backing it up and not backing it up. For example, if I had, and I'll just throw out some arbitrary numbers. Let's say I have a 1 terabyte backup drive and I have a 500 gig internal. No problem. Time Machine is going to back up the 500 gigs onto the 1 terabyte. But if I then plug in a separate 2 terabyte drive, obviously Time Machine is going to ignore it because that drive is too big to fit on the 1 terabyte anyway. So it's going to say, there's nothing I can do with this, I'm just going to ignore it and not include it. But now let's say I plug in a 250 gig drive. So I have the 500 internal, I have the 1 terabyte backup, and I have a 250 gig separate external I just plugged in. Well, that should be fair game. It should be able to back up that drive onto the 1 terabyte. But whether or not it chooses to do so, that's the part I'm not sure about. If it does it automatically or if I have to tell it. So here's how you can tell if it is going to do it or not. When you bring up Time Machine, I use this feature the opposite way. I use this feature to tell it what not to back up. But this is also where you would tell it or see what it's not backing up or tell it or remove that so it does back it up. So let's go to Options. And when you go to Options, there is an Exclude feature. Exclude these items from the backup. So if you see that new drive you just plugged in listed there, that means it's not backing it up. And all you would do is select it and hit the minus button so that it includes it, because anything in this list is excluded. Now, why do I have something in the list? The one thing I have in the list is my Dropbox folder, because theoretically, anything in that folder is already on my hard drive and in the cloud on Dropbox and on my other computers that have Dropbox. So I don't really want to tie up Time Machine time and space backing up this thing that's pretty backed up as it is. And again, that's a risk I'm taking. So all I did to exclude it, and here let me get to the Finder here. All I did to exclude it, let's do this, was simply drag a folder into the list. So now it's not going to back up my door prizes folder anymore either, until I tell it to go back to including it. So whatever you drag in there, you could drag a whole hard drive in there and say, no, do not back up this hard drive. Or if it is in there and you do want it to be backed up, so I do want my door prizes folder backed up, then I would just minus it. And as long as there's enough room on your Time Machine folder, or I'm sorry, Time Machine drive, it will back up whatever's not in the excluded list. Make sense? I know it's kind of talking backwards because you're telling it what to include by removing it from the excluded list. But that's really what this list is for.
Can we assume if you have an external hard drive plugged in, it'll automatically leave it plugged in and on, it'll automatically back it up?
As long as it's not in this list. And as long as there's enough room.
We set up a network and we have a 3 terabyte drive on a Mac Mini, which is on a surge protector rather than a UPS. And the problem I'm having is, even though the surge protector is doing its job, the surges that it's encountering are sufficient that it's somehow interrupting the drive enough that the Time Machine doesn't work. In other words, there are enough surges.
That's probably not what's happening.
Something's happening that it's...
The computer functions and the drive functions, but it's just not using, Time Machine is just not using it, then that's not surges. That's something else. And if you were getting those kind of surges, you got more problems. You would want to put in a UPS at that point, or have an electrician come out.
Surges, it's dropouts more likely. Yeah. The drive just got to drop out for fractions of a second, and the Time Machine backup's dead.
Right.
Where are you going to crap a USB port on the computer or on the drive?
It could be any number of things, but I doubt if it's surges. All right, I saw another hand go up. Ken, did you have a question?
Sort of the same thing, you've got a drive video file.
Time machine.
Time machine.
I'm going to say, and this is the blanket rule, I'm not going to tell you it's backed up so you can then go away thinking, oh, I'm safe, it's backed up. I'm going to tell you to go look at the list.
That's what I was wondering whether I should.
Yes, you should go look, because if I say, oh, sure, it's being backed up, and then 3 months later you have a crash and none of those files are there, you're going to be mad at me. So go look. Now you have something to check.
Time machine related. I have a time machine drive that I use that I no longer have, but I use backups to restore stuff to the new. For housekeeping purposes, I wanted to rename the drive. Computer seemed like it didn't want me to do that. I inferred from the dialogue that I got. So it sounded like reinitialize the drive and start over. Do that. It seemed like renaming the drive was I should.
I've never tried to rename a time machine backup drive, but I can see where it would be picky.
Yeah, it seemed to think that that wasn't right at all and start over. So I wiping backups. It just seemed kind of an odd thing.
Yeah.
But normally it's not a big deal for time machine. Want to deal with it.
All right, back to Pat's question from earlier. So throughout my presentations, a lot of times you'll see me zoom in like that. And that is actually an old trick that presenters have been using for years and years and years that is in the accessibility settings. So in accessibility, it looks a little different for different versions of macOS, but the features are the same. There is a zoom feature. And the zoom feature allows you to use keyboard shortcuts to zoom in wherever your pointer is on the screen. And you know who asked me the most about this feature after every presentation I've ever done? Windows users. Because they don't have this built in. So Mac users is just a matter of turning it on. Windows users, you have to use something else. I don't know what to tell you. Now, there's another trick to this since we're talking about tips and tricks. When simply turning it on will enable you to zoom, but I don't want to have to zoom in increments. I don't want to have to keep pressing the keyboard keys to get to a certain zoom level. So if you go to more options, you can actually set the maximum zoom with one keyboard, with one click that it goes to, in my case, 3 times magnification instead of 1, 2, 3, having to press the button 3 times to get there. And then when I zoom out, it just goes right back out to actual size. So that is my extra zooming tip. So if I go to 6 times now, and now I zoom in, it'll jump to 6 times magnification in one swoop, as opposed to me having to press the button 6 times.
What does that compare to control and fusion?
I don't use a click wheel, so I wouldn't know.
Can I ask a question about time?
You can ask a question about time machine.
For all the guys who work, I have an issue that I have a time machine backup that's a year old. And when I reinstalled the software on the backup, I started having problems with my user account. So I made a new user. And the old user account, I'm slowly taking things off of, and that old account where I backed up time machine.
Okay?
I haven't backed up time machine since the new account. And I'm wondering, will everything still work? When I tell time machine to turn on and start backing up again, will it want to just reconnect and start from where it left off? The other user.
Well, time machine is hard drive based, not user account based. So if you have 3 users at one point and stop using time machine, and then you go to 4 users, it's just going to back up the drive as it sees it. And continuing adding to that backup with 4 users instead of 3. Yep. So it's not, like well, I have a tip on multiple users, so I'll wait till we get to that, but it's not user specific.
I just want to make sure you're multi-white without.
No, it should not wipe anything user specific. Go ahead.
Yeah, to get back to the last bit,
Mhm.
catch counting down, expand.
Okay, so let's start from scratch. System preferences, accessibility, and again, depending on your version of Mac OS, it may be in a different spot in the accessibility, but this is where it is. Click on Zoom, and then if you don't do anything but just enable keyboard shortcuts, Command, Option, plus sign will zoom you in one level at a time. I don't like the one level at a time, so if you go down to more options, then you can set it for whatever your maximum zoom is going to be in one click. So you were looking down where you were writing, more options.
Terry, the second checkbox there is the one I was speaking.
Mm-hmm. I don't use it, so I couldn't tell you.
Well, that's just regular scroll.
That would drive me nuts. Because because even watching you do it is driving me nuts. I just want to click and get right to it and click and get out. Yeah. Show them again. Everyone's now looking at you to see it. So you have your choice.
Works good if you also like the mouse.
Yeah.
What you do almost similar, press one key, and a plus sign and a minus sign.
That's in an application by application preference. So like, for example, he just said, well, can't you do Command plus and zoom in? Sure, and like websites and things like that, but that doesn't work across the board for the whole system. Like that doesn't work in the Finder, for example. In the Finder, it only works, for example, what you're saying works great in web browsers, but not everywhere, not in all applications. This is system-wide.
So it will work on web pages as well.
Sure. It's zooming in the entire screen. It's not zooming a page bigger. The plus sign trick that he's showing would be better for a web browser if you just want to make that page bigger.
Because when I print it so little and I can't read it.
Exactly.
That's what I do to make it simple.
Right, so if I go to, let's go Safari, and I do Command plus, that's making this web page
Yeah,
bigger.
that's what I do. Yeah.
Right. But that's only going to work in the web browser. That's not, if I go to the Finder, I can press Command, here, let's go to Finder and hide everything else. Pressing Command plus does nothing here. So that's why I use my tip that works across the board and everything.
And some web browsers too, depending on the site you're on, if you zoom in using his technique, it says it's not supported and it kind of distorts your too.
Right. Right. So this is, again, I use it for what it's designed for people that are vision impaired. I use it to show people small things on screen when they're further back. So to each his own. Any more questions about this stuff before I move on? Go ahead.
I'm computer like grade 1.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm doing this and everything's magnified now.
Command, Option, minus.
Command.
Yep, the Option key next to Command. There are two keys next to each other, Command and Option,
Okay, got it.
and minus.
Problem. Thank you.
Now, my sadistic side would have just simply made a joke and said, once you zoom in, you can never zoom back out. You have to get a new computer. But I was being nice today.
Thank you very much.
Or you would have to reboot or something like that. Yes, you have to reboot each time you zoom in. All right, you had a question about Time Machine. We'll come back over.
Does Time Machine start at 10.6?
When did we get Time Machine? I don't remember.
10.5.
10.5.
Does the drive have to be an external drive?
It has to be either an external drive or a separate drive in the same computer. It could be another internal drive. Right. But it has to be a second drive, whether it's external or internal.
Otherwise it backs it up. So,
Yeah, which is not a backup. Okay, over here and then we'll come around.
housekeeping. I don't know if anybody else is having trouble hearing the questions from the audience. But
I'll try to remember to repeat, yes.
With a time machine hard drive, when that thing gets full, does it just toss out the old ones?
Okay, his question was, with the time machine drive, when it gets full, what does it do? Because at some point, your time machine backup drive is going to get full. It's going to happen no matter what you do. So your preferences are set. Well, actually, it's not a preference. It will just do it, but you can set a preference to notify you. So what Time Machine does is it backs up every hour, and then I think it goes to, it archives that to a daily backup, and then a weekly backup, and then a monthly backup. Once that drive fills up, it starts deleting the oldest backups to make room for the new ones. So here's another tip. The bigger your Time Machine drive is, the further back in time you'll be able to go. The smaller the drive is, you might not be able to go far back enough to get back what you lost. So for example, I deleted a file in March, and I just remembered I really need that file. That was how many ever months ago, 5 months ago, whatever. I can bring up Time Machine, and if my drive is big enough or my data doesn't change often enough, I could go all the way back to March and get that file. But on a smaller drive, potentially it has been replaced because the drive filled up and it deleted the oldest backup. So that's another tip. When you're buying your Time Machine backup drive, again, drives are pretty cheap these days, don't skimp. Go bigger. That would protect you longer and let you go further back in time.
or double up.
Or double up.
Yeah, going with time machine, does it have to be a brand time machine or can it be any hard drive?
There's no brand Time Machine. It is any hard drive. There is no specific brand.
Specific format, but not.
Specific format, yes. So it has to be Mac formatted, but not, and you can do that with just about any drive.
If you have like a 1 terabyte drive and you don't have a whole lot of data that you're backing up, can you partition that drive?
Yeah, okay, good question. So let's say you have a small internal drive, let's say 250 gigs, 250 gigs. That would be very small. 250 gigs. And you have a 1 terabyte external drive for backup. And you're just doing word processing documents. You're not doing a whole lot. So you're not even filling up that 250 gig drive. Could you then partition that external drive and maybe use 500 and 500? Like 500 for something else? Yes, you can. Should you? Because here's my question. What are you putting on that other partition? Because whatever you're putting on that other partition is now not being backed up. So it's important enough for you to have that other partition to put stuff on it, but what you're saying is, I don't really care about it. They don't match. So bite the bullet, get the bigger drive, they're cheaper, do it.
I partitioned it and I called one closet. Things that I think are really neat, but I don't want to have to worry about them, so I stick them in closet. So I have one for work, one for home, and one for closet. It's not backed up, it's just sitting there.
So you have a partition that you're saying if it crashed, you wouldn't care. If you lost what was on it, you wouldn't care.
Ah.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. So she said she has this partition called closet. Is that if that partition is not being backed up by anything, you're saying whatever's on it, it's okay to lose.
But the whole problem is you can back up. I've still got 5.5-inch discs with stuff on it, and the 3 1/4, and all of these other things, which can never be retrieved unless I have the hardware.
True.
So we have almost a loose leaf history.
Well, okay, so let me address that. What she's saying is she's got backups and backups and backups from years past on different media, And once that hardware that reads that media is no longer available or useful, then the media really isn't much good unless you're going to go find the hardware to read it. Just like your computer, when you go from a very old computer to a very new computer, you migrate stuff over. You have to treat your backups the same way. So, for example, if you still have stuff backed up onto floppies or SideQuest or CD-ROMs or whatever, and you're saying at some point that it's not, I'm not going to have a SideQuest drive anymore. I'm not going to have a drive that can read this format anymore. Then before you get rid of that drive, it's probably best to move that backup onto something newer, like a hard drive, if that data is still valid or usable to you. That's the other thing, is what's on it still important. Because then there's also the software that reads it.
I'm a librarian and people are always coming in and asking for something from 25 years ago or 200 years ago, which one of the problems with electronic media storage is being able to things that no one thought was important at one time. So, yeah. And there is no way to get around it. You're going to lose it. It's just much easier to lose it electronically.
I disagree. There is a way around it. You just have to be diligent about it.
Right.
I've got a 2 terabyte network drive. I've got 2 Windows computer backup. Is there any chance of conflict?
You have a 2 terabyte network drive. You have 3 computers backing up, 2 Windows, 1 Mac. Is there a chance for conflict? In what way?
Is the Mac drive backing up to it?
Don't assume anything. Is it?
I mean, I see it on the network.
Okay.
So it shouldn't be a problem. Can I do that?
May I speak?
You may.
Kids, number one, don't be cheap. Go out and buy a drive. You need a drive back. Don't partition drives and say, oh, this side's good, this side's bad. If it's good,
It's not partition. It's not partition.
okay, now, second of all, a backup you can't restore ain't a backup. So what you need to do periodically is try and restore those files after you go back. Don't automatically assume just because it says 100%, I backed it up, I don't care what program you use, and you think you're okay. If you can't restore it, it doesn't matter. So periodically, once in a while, grab one of those drives, find a blank space, and restore it.
I've got a smaller drive that I'm backing up. But I'm just wondering, since I've got it out on the network, is there any problem I might run into, or will it just back up to that network drive without telling it? Is that inefficient?
If it seems to be backing up, again, like Calvin suggests, do a test. Try and restore some files from it. That's the best way you'll know that it's working. Okay. All right, moving on, because we could do a whole meeting on backup, and we have, but it looks like it's time to do another one at some point. All right, so back to the tips. Now, what I did, and I saw this on a Friday, Monday, something post on the blog about tips on binder windows, so I'm going to talk about it now. Oh, she heard me. Okay. So, yeah, I know it's been done before. I'm making a joke, but this actually is part of her tip. So, what I did was I turned what you're seeing right now, except for the splash screen, more into the way a Mac would ship today. And what I mean by that is, Mac OS, when you get a new Mac today, or even for the last few versions, Apple turns a lot of things off by default that older time Mac users like us are used to seeing. For example, where's my hard drive? There's no hard drive icon by default. So a new user doesn't care because they're not used to seeing it. But when we get a new Mac or new OS or something and we don't see that hard drive up there, it starts to freak us out. So Apple is not necessarily hiding the fact that you have a hard drive. What they're saying is, do you really need an icon for it on your desktop? What is that doing for you? Because if I want to get to what's on my hard drive, I go to my applications, which there's an application called Finder, click on it, and there's all my stuff on my hard drive. So the only reason that icon is the reason we care is because we're used to it. We're just used to seeing it there. Now, so I just proved you don't need it, but let's say you get a new Mac or a new OS and you want it there because it just makes you feel better. So what you do is go to Finder, Preferences, and right off the bat, there's a show these items on desktop, and most likely they're all but maybe one or all unchecked. So if you want to see your hard disks, external drives, CD-ROMs and DVDs and iPods that you plug in, and file servers, go ahead and check all those off. And they will now list there as icons as they always did from day one in macOS. It's up to you. Now that they're there, and again, I can use them or not, I'm going to bring up a Finder window. I'm going to also turn off something else that used to drive me crazy. I like knowing when I open up a window how much space I have left on that drive, whatever that drive is. So that is the status bar that's at the bottom of the window. That, again, in the newer OSs is turned off by default. So all you have to do to turn it on, and more importantly, to turn it on and make it stick. Because just turning it on sometimes, depending on what you do next, will not make it stick. So to turn it on and make it stick, open up any Finder window, go to the View menu, show Status Bar, and then close the window. That's what makes it stick. If you go in and start navigating and doing other things, it may not stick. Especially if you open up another window from another drive. So if you want it to stick and be the default, the best way to do that is open up a window, turn it on, close that window. That's what makes it stick. So now the next time I open up a window, my status bar is there. And it will be there from now on until I turn it off.
How do you turn it on?
Under the View menu, show status bar, which now it says hide status bar because I've already shown it. Now in Sheeta's video that she did on the blog, she also talks about the path bar, which is an optional thing you can turn on. And what this will do is it will show you as you dig down into folders or go into folders on your hard drive. So if I go to my documents folder, it will show me the path on my hard drive to get to that folder. So it's saying that folder is in my user account called MGD, which is in my users folder, which is on my hard drive. So that's showing the status bar. So if you're ever lost, and you're like, I'm in a folder, but where is it? That's one way to find out. I normally, I think I do have the status bar on, but I don't really use it that often. Because if I ever want to know where, turned off the wrong one, sorry. Show that, hide path bar. If I ever want to know where I am, I use an older trick, and that is if you hold down your command key and click on the name of any folder, it will show you the path of where you got to, how you got to it. I've been using that one for years, so the path bar is newer, and I'm just, again, old dog, new tricks, I use the old one. Say that again?
Select one to folder.
Yep.
How do you get to where it shows you how many?
Open it.
Or read column.
Right. Column View's been out for years and years and years, probably almost since day one on the Mac OS 10. I just never really got into Column View.
If you're in Icon View, you can have, there's an option to turn on a feature where it shows you how many.
Yeah. I'm more of a list view. I just always have been. I don't know why.
Why wouldn't you use the triangle
To do what?
to show the items that are in the file?
You can. The triangle to show the items.
Expansion triangle that.
Oh, yeah. He didn't want to look at them. He just wants to know how many. So using his answer.
But when you do the triangle trick, it won't tell you how many there are.
Yeah, but no, yes and no. Because if, let's say there were 5 items in that folder, now it's going to add them to the rest of the items I'm looking at. So it's really not going to tell me how many are in that folder. It's going to tell me how many are in this window. No, it's one of 7 selected items.
To get it focused. 100 ways.
There's 100 ways. Get Info will tell you as well. All right. Next, let's say you do drill down. Okay, so I'm now going to be 2 or 3 folders deep. Now we know that there is a forward back button. These buttons have been there for a while and they work like a web browser. And I'm going to reemphasize that. They do work like a web browser. Because in your web browser's forward and back buttons, if you hold them down, they become menus. So if I hold this down, it becomes a menu that I can go all the way back to the beginning. So that's another way to do it. I could say you killed my presentation. See how that works? You did videos about what I was going to do this month. Works both ways. I think you should come up here and do some tips.
Sheila, I'm sure your audience, the audience for your videos is much larger than the group here, so most of the people won't know.
You know what? How much of this, by the way, that you knew but it was good to see again? See, that's what I mean. So it doesn't matter how many times we show it and how many different ways. It's always good information to see. All right. Oh, now I see why this is weird, because this isn't the most recent version. Okay. All right. Next, along the same lines, in your home user folder, which if I go to users and I go to me, it will show all of that user's folders except one. The one we were used to seeing before, and Apple turned it off in one of the later Mac OSs. And that's the library folder. The library folder is handy because it's where a lot of your applications will store their preferences. It's also dangerous, so that's why Apple hides it from you. Now, there are various tips and techniques on how to turn it on and re-enable it and have it show and all that, but I got one tip that makes it just that much more convenient, because I really don't need to see my library folder every time I go in here. I only need to see my library folder when I need it. So I don't want to have to turn on something that I really don't need to see every day, but I don't want to have to go to the hack to do it when I do need to see it. So here's a simple tip. If you go up to the Go menu, that will show you everything that's in your home folder. If you hold down the Option key and go up to your Go menu, it'll show you your library folder. And you can just jump right to it when you need it. So that way I get the best of both worlds. I get this folder that's kind of hidden that I don't accidentally do something weird with, but when I need it, I can quickly get to it by holding down the Option key, going up to Go, and choosing library. Best of both worlds. Okay, next. I'm a sidebar guy, meaning I like the stuff on the sidebar, and I like putting my own things on the sidebar and putting them where I want. And the reason I like that is because the sidebar is kind of that way of quickly getting to a specific folder you use all the time. So, and this is not my standard user account, so let me go make one up. So let's say, for example, in my pictures folder, I have a folder called Door Prizes, and this is where when we do our drawing after each month and you see the prize, you actually see the picture. That's where it's getting those pictures from. I'm always putting new pictures in there every month. So right now I've got a copy of it or an alias of it on my dock, and I can get to it that way. But it's also just as easy, and by the way, the icon here in this menu is draggable. So you can drag that icon anywhere you need to, including the sidebar. So now whenever I go into a Finder window and I need to get to Door Prizes, it's one click away from there, no matter what window I'm in. More importantly, when you're in a lot of programs, open and save dialog boxes, here, let me see if I can do one here. Let's do text edit. And let's do cancel. File. Open. No, I don't want to do, oh, on my Mac. There we go. When you go to open in most programs, the sidebar is accessible. So if you want to grab something that you use all the time that's in a specific folder and it's in your sidebar, you can go right to that folder in that application to get to it. So that's another reason why I prefer sidebar to like the dock, because if that folder's on the dock, in my open dialog box, I'm never going to see it. But in the sidebar, I'm going to see it every time.
I'm not sure whether it was on purpose or by accident, but I have found out you put, the document is like processing document at the side.
Yeah, sure.
Almost anything in the sidebar.
Right. So her point was you can put not just folders in the sidebar, but documents. So if you want to just click on a document right there in the sidebar, you can.
And then every once in a while, fiddling, and I'm not quite watching, something goes poof.
Oh, can't do it from there. Well, I don't know how that one's not going to work.
I'm back on.
Yeah, they may have changed the way that works. All right, so let's say that we put something there that we decide we don't want there anymore. So I put that user information folder in there and or by accident or later I don't need it anymore. How do I get rid of it? So if I drag it off the sidebar, snaps back. So what do? Hold down the command key and drag it off the sidebar. And now it's gone.
Yeah, when you were doing the icon off of the file and dragging it in the sidebar, are you now double populating that folder, or are you literally moving it from the folder?
Whenever you drag something in the sidebar or the dock, his question was, when I drug it from the icon at the top and put it in the sidebar, am I duplicating it or somehow making copies or whatever, or moving it? Whenever you put something in the sidebar or the dock, you're automatically putting an alias to the original file there. So you're not making any extra copies or moving or duplicating or doing anything. So those folders, that door prize folder, is still where it always was, which is in the pictures folder. So if I go here, command key, it's still in the pictures folder where it always was. It's just a quick reference. The dock and sidebar are quick things to get to when you want to, quick ways to get to something that you use all the time. Now, I said I had a multi-user tip, so let me explain what that is. Apple, I think even back in the OS 9 days, had multiple users, and of course it's been a feature of OS 10 since day one. Multiple users were really designed by Apple at the time for, let's say, a single computer household where 2 or more people used that computer. So that means that, let's say there's a John and a Susan at home and it's their computer combined, but John's got his files and Susan's got her files. John's got his playlist, Susan has hers. John has his bookmarks, Susan has hers, so forth and so on. So rather than have one account that they're constantly fighting between where things are and what's being bookmarked and saved and whatever, you can actually set up multiple users of the same computer that they actually have their own username and log in. And when they log in, it's their environment the way they left it. Now, when you have multiple users, the 2 or more users share the same applications, so you don't have to have the applications installed more than once. But everything else, for the most part, is specific to that user. So if you bring up a web browser in a user account, and you go to a website and you bookmark a site, but then you log out and log in as a different user, that website will not be bookmarked in that separate user. So I'm the only user of the only human user of this computer, but I have 3 or 4 user accounts on here. because I use this computer for different things. So I'm logged in right now as my Mac Group user. So what that does is when I log in as Mac Group, I get my Mac Group desktop picture, I get my Mac Group iPhoto library, I get my Mac Group iTunes, I get my Mac Group bookmarks, I get my Mac Group documents and settings and preferences and everything to do with Mac Group.
Different personality.
Good way to say it. Different personality. When I go home, I'm going to log out of Mac Group and log in as Terry White. When I'm doing an Adobe presentation, I'm going to log in as Adobe. And each user has its own set of things going on. That way I'm not conflicted. Because for example, how many times have you seen a presentation and the user's email alerts are popping up or some other kind of alerts popping up and they're constantly dismissing them or they're embarrassing or whatever?
It's distracting.
Yeah, it's distracting. It could also be interesting, depending on what it is. So I set up a second user a long time ago just for presentations. So none of that stuff would happen because none of that stuff is turned on in the second user. So whether it's multiple people using the same computer or you using the computer for different reasons, you should take advantage of having multiple user accounts.
How many of those are privileged accounts?
What do you mean?
Can administer the computer?
All of them?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a backup,
Okay.
because you normally administer it from your account. Normally.
Well, it's hard to say normally because if I'm logged in as my Adobe user all day and I get a software update, I'm going to do it.
Okay, well, my point here is that if you only had one administrator account, and that account had a failure, you'd have no way to continue administering.
True.
So having an extra account as an administrator account, besides the one you usually use, is a backup. Thank you, Calvin.
Yes. All right. And here's another reason that, let's say none of this applies to you. You're not doing presentations. It's just you. It's your computer. You don't care. No other user's going to have bookmarks or anything like that. I'll give you one other reason why you might want to set up, in addition to what he just said, at least one more user. A lot of problems we run into are damaged preferences or fonts or things that are specific to a user. So a lot of times I will tell people if they're having this, they've reinstalled the application, but they're still having a problem. Log in as a different user and see and run the exact same application and see if you have the same problem. And if you don't have the same problem, then there was a damaged preference on your main user. There's something going on your main user. It's not the application, because if you can log in as a different user on the same computer using the same application and not have a problem, then it's something to do with your other user account.
Let's say you're adding a person onto a laptop.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You have to set up an email account for that person.
Okay.
How do you set up like preferences?
Got it. So his question is, let's say it's my laptop and I'm adding on a new user, a family member, spouse, whatever. Do I have to set up a new email account? How do they get their new preferences? The minute you go add a new user, and we'll go to user accounts and preferences. And we'll go to, and I have to log in to do it. By the way, it's a good idea to keep this area locked because you don't want something else adding user accounts but you. When I go to add a new user account, I can say to make them a standard user or an administrator. Administrator means that they will be able to install software, do everything as if it were their own computer. A standard user means that they will need your password and your username whenever they need to administer the computer. So that's a choice you get to make. So let's say I'm going to add him as an administrator. And we'll make up a name, John White. And so it's going to propose that, and we'll give John a password. And create a hint. So if I create that user, just trying to see, do I really want to do this? I probably don't. But if I create that user and then log in as that user, it'll be like I've started up that Mac for the first time. It'll say, okay, here's the default dock with the default applications in them. It's a default desktop picture. And then when you launch mail, it's going to say, hey, this is mail for the first time. Set me up. What's your email account, your email password, so forth and so on. So it's setting up that new user is almost like setting up that computer for the first time for that user. So it'll be just like you bought it brand new. Do you need to put in an email account? Do you need to put in bookmarks and all of that stuff? Yes, because that user will have none of those things. Go ahead.
The other advantage I think is I create a test account of mine.
Yep.
And there's no logins that come up, so Crash Plan won't be playing in the background.
Right.
And it'll look like it was right out of the box.
Right.
Same idea.
Same idea. Okay, any other questions on multiple users?
You want to lock it?
Oh yeah, thank you.
What about the guest?
Guest user is an option in newer OSs. What that does is it says, I'm sitting next to someone who's not going to be around much longer or around me forever. So they're temporary. They're a friend that stopped by and they want to go surf the internet and check their email online and stuff like that. I don't want them doing that on my stuff. So I can say, log in as guest user. That user has no password, has no administrator rights, and it will basically, it's like creating a new account that goes away the minute you log out. So they'll be able to do whatever they want, not touching any of your stuff. They can run your applications, but not any of your data. They can surf, they can do whatever, but the minute you log out, all of their stuff that they ever downloaded on that account goes away. So it's a temporary new user.
So if we just want to take one computer, I can use sticks, go on this guest user so I'm not, because I'm always afraid I'll do something.
Mm-hmm.
And will you get into my email?
You'll have to set it all up, but keep in mind, the minute you log out, it's going to all go away. So guest user, think of it as temporary user.
Sort of like
Yeah, public account of the library or whatever. You're logging in that person, or that person's using your computer temporarily. The minute you log out and log back in as you, everything they did is gone.
How do you transfer contacts? Other computer.
Okay, so let's say you had a computer that's already in existence, and you set up a new user, and you want to migrate their stuff from their computer onto your computer onto that user, which is what I'm hearing as the question. So standard, you won't get the standard migration assistant because the computer's already been set up. So you're going to have to do it manually. And what that means is you're going to have to go into the applications, which, by the way, one of the sidebar things I normally have on my account, my main account, my Terry White account, is the utilities folder, because I'm always going there. So go to utilities folder and migration assistant. So you can launch migration assistant manually, plug in their old computer, hard drive, whatever, and just transfer that one user account. Now, if that's what you're doing, do it that way instead of setting up the user from scratch. Because what you're saying is, I don't want to create a new user and have them create all their things from scratch. I already have a user on another computer. I just want them on this computer. So then don't create the new user in system preferences. Do it through migration assistant.
But does that bring over all the chat?
Well, you can uncheck all the stuff you don't want. Just check that one user account that you do want. And it'll bring over all their documents and preferences and settings and crap and everything else.
But if the preferences are crap.
Then you're getting crap, right?
Curious migration system, has it gotten more specific or more user-friendly? How many options you have? Can A has select 5 through and giving you more flexibility as they go on the OS?
Yes, it is improved. It's gotten more flexible, but I don't think it only gets granular to a point. Like I said, you can bring over a user, but I can't say, well, bring over the user. I'm trying to remember. You can even pick documents now. You can pick the different folders, but I don't think you can say, bring over just the documents and not the preferences. I don't think it's that granular yet. So it's going to bring over that user primarily. All right, next tip.
Another migration.
Go ahead.
Is there a way with migration system if you have, let's say a person had the road account and
Okay. Question was, the person had two different computers. Can you merge the user accounts into one with Migration Assistant?
No, it override.
Yeah, I can't think of a way that Migration Assistant's going to do that for you.
any way to do that?
No, it's a manual copy process. Yeah, I can't think of any automated way to do that because it's not going to know what's good and what's not. Okay, here's one that I shared before, but I think it's worth a repeat. In Mountain Lion for sure, and I believe Lion as well, the Finder and the applications have gotten more friendly or more Mac or iOS-like for sharing things. So for example, if I go back to this folder of pictures, and let's say I just grab a few randomly, and I now want to email those 4 or 5 pictures out. How are you doing that today? One at a time, okay. Worst case scenario. Copy and paste, okay, that works.
Right click share.
That's the way we're going to do it.
Command click to select the assortment and drag it to a mail message.
Drag them into a mail message. That's the answer I was looking for that I think most people are probably still doing. Well, all of those ways will work, but it just depends on what's more convenient for you. For example, if I've already got the mail message open and I've already started composing it and now I'm just ready to go grab the attachments and they're right there, sure, dragging them in works great. But if I'm starting from the mindset of, I want to email those 5 pictures to Jack, and I'm looking at the pictures, I haven't even launched mail yet, then it's easier to do it the way I'm going to show you. And that is simply right-click on what, and it don't have to be pictures, it could be any kind of documents, whatever's emailable. Right-click on it, and then go to Share, and then choose Email. What that will do is launch mail. And mail's bouncing at me, telling me something could be potentially wrong with mail. Oh, I haven't set mail up on this account. Okay, it will launch mail. It will create a new message and automatically throw those photos into it. And now I can just address it to whoever I want. While we're here, let's do a couple of quick mail tips.
Can you do that from iPhoto or just in pictures?
Can you do that from iPhoto or just in pictures? iPhotos should have its own share via email feature, doesn't it?
Yes.
Telling me that my password and my name is not correct.
All right, let me fix that well-known problem for you. When you're trying to do things from iPhoto, or you're trying to mail photos from iPhoto is what I'm trying to say. iPhoto has a built-in feature that lets you do it, but what's hidden and what it often screams about is your account isn't set up right, or your password isn't right, or your whatever's not right. But it doesn't say, type it in here. It doesn't say how to fix it. It just tells you it's wrong. So if you go to your iPhoto preferences, I'll wait for you to look. In the iPhoto preferences, there's an accounts feature. When you go to accounts, that's where you can put in your email account that you want to use with the username, password, and email settings.
Gmail too?
I don't know, I never tried.
Yes.
Someone just said yes.
It shows it at me.com.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I'm saying. This is where you would go change it. So like it says, it shows my iCloud account there, and there's my iCloud account. And you need to make sure all of this is filled in as well, because this is what it uses to send.
The password, is that the password that I use?
That's your email no, whatever your email password is. It could be the same as your Apple password, but it's looking for your email password.
How do I find it?
How do you find your email password?
I mean, I know that's not what I see it. How did it get there?
That's what it's saying is not there. So if you go there, it's probably blank. So you need to type it in. You have your computer right there. Just do it. Great.
Gary?
Yes.
It might be easy to mention that on the general page, you just set it and tell them to use mail instead of iPhoto, mailing out.
That will do too. So if you don't need all of the templates and cool ways that it does it,
No.
by the way, if you didn't hear her, she adamantly says, I don't. Okay, then Jack's suggestion is even better. You don't have to mess with the accounts at all. You can just say, email using mail. So now it will work the same way as the Finder did. It'll just take whatever photos you select and throw them in the mail, and then you're all set. The other advantage to doing it via mail is because when you do it via iPhoto, you have no history of it. It doesn't go into your sent mail. It doesn't do anything like that, depending on the account. So it's better to, if you're trying to keep track of everything you've ever sent via email, it's better to do it with your mail account.
Could you show again how you got to this?
Sure. iPhoto. Once you have iPhoto open,
Yes.
iPhoto preferences. General. Email using mail. So now if I, go ahead.
If you set up an account a long time ago, like you told me, and you forgot the password, you try to go back in, and it won't let you go back in. How do you change that, or how do you get that password?
If you forgot your email password, whoever your email provider is, whether it's Apple or anyone else, you're going to have to go to their website and do a I forgot my password thing so that they can let you reset it. Right.
If it's saved in your keychain, you don't know it. If it's saved in your keychain, you can get to it using the keychain access utility, which will let you view saved passwords.
So now if I select these photos and I do share and I say email, since I set it to email, I'm not an iPhoto user, I'm going to assume it's going to give me a choice of size, which I'll accept the defaults. And I'm going to say compose message, and it does the exact same thing. Brings up mail and attaches those photos. So that is the much better way to do it.
Can you pick which mail client you use?
Yes, you can pick which mail client because I saw that it gave me a choice of Outlook. So preferences, that can be mail, Outlook, or whatever email client you have. Alrighty.
Terry, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Glad that makes your day. All right, now notice, so while we're here, we'll do a couple of mail tips. Notice that I have an option to, she just sent some pictures she's been waiting to send for 6 months. No, just,
For a whole week, it's been always working. I don't know what happened to it.
all right. Notice I have an option for 2 and CC, which is carbon copy. But a lot of times I might send something BCC, which is blind carbon copy. Because what blind carbon copy does is, let's say I want to send it out to 50 people, and I don't want the 50 people's email addresses exposed to the other people that are being sent. So you put all 50 people into BCC, but there is no BCC. Because by default, it's turned off. I know.
I don't.
That's what I'm about to show. All right. So there's a little menu over here in the left-hand corner that lets you customize what things you can use. So I can turn on BCC. There's BCC now. I can even turn on a reply to field, and I'll explain what that is. So now I can turn on and off whichever fields I'm going to need, and that's sticky, so that will stay on from now on. So I can just put all the email addresses in here. I could put maybe a 2 there, and then some in here and some in there. It's up to you. Now, what's the reply to? The reply to says, I'm sending this email from an account that I don't want you to reply back to. Meaning, I'm sending this email from an account called MacGroup-Detroit@me.com, which I don't check very often. So if you're going to reply back to me, don't reply back to that one. Reply back to the one I type in here, which could be terry@mail.com, which is not a real account, but for the sake of the video. Okay, so now when they get the message, they don't have to they don't have to look at that field, they don't have to read it, but when they hit reply, it'll automatically go to terry@mail.com. So I can basically set a default for them if they hit reply, which account it's going to reply back to. And that's the reply to choice here. Now there's also a priority field, which that's what this pop-up is for. And it, depending on the receiver's email account, they might sort emails by priority. So if you mark it higher priority, then it goes up on the top of their list, or they know it's important. They know it's something they should read right away. There's no guarantee of any of that, by the way.
Is there an indicator like a flag, a star, or something?
Exclamation points. So there will be no exclamation point, 1 exclamation point, or 2.
That's very mumble. If you go to the menu, it says view, and you add subtract the BC.
Yeah.
And there you either click it,
Yeah.
show it, or unclick it to take it away.
I know.
That's what I usually.
Okay. Yes, there's more ways to do something in most programs.
I once had a problem when I was sending out multiple emails to a lot of people. I always would do it using a BCC, and one of the recipients didn't like it because he wanted to know how the email addresses of the other people are sending it. And I refused to do that.
Good for you. That's the right way to do it. All right. Speaking of sending pictures, I'm trying to see if I got any. Sure, I have an example over here. Let's do it. Let's go to demo files. Photos, fall pictures. Trying to find something a little larger than normal. Montana, maybe? Okay, yeah, these are good ones. So here's that's probably, I don't know. Let's see if that works. It's probably not going to work. Let's see. Oh, it did. Okay. I was shocked to see that work. If you have a large meaning large file size photo, and I'm trying to find a better JPEG example. Okay, we'll do this one. There's a image size option over here on the right-hand side. And what image size does is I believe it defaults to actual size, which means however big the photo is, that's what you're sending. If it's a 5 megabyte photo, they're getting 5 megabytes. But if you're sending a photo that doesn't need, like the recipient doesn't need the high quality, large file size, you're wasting data, you're wasting time, you're wasting download time, all of the above, especially if they're looking at things on phones. So you can have mail size down the photo or photos that you're sending in mail for that one time. It's not going to touch the originals. It's only scaling down the ones you're sending. So you can go in and you can say large, medium, or small. So if I do large, it's now 285K versus 1.6 megs. And it didn't change the size, meaning dimensions of the photo all that much. I can go down to medium. I can go down to small. So you can say, I just need them to look at it. It's not something they need to retouch. It's not a high-end photo they're going to print. It's just something to look at. I can just make my emails go faster by having mail scale those pictures down for me. Now, a perfect example when I use this all the time. In my studio building, the electric meter's inside. So I have to be there for the meter reader to get in to read it. I'm not always there on the 14th of the month for them to come, so they send me nasty letters and saying, we can't read your meter. And you go, okay. So, and I send back, well, maybe you should put it on the outside. No, okay. Anyway. But what they do allow me to do is take a picture of the meter and email it to them. And that I'm doing my own reading that way. And so I'm taking a picture with my iPhone, which is 8 megapixels. They don't need an 8 megapixel picture to see the numbers on the meter. So I use this size feature all the time when I'm doing that email. I make it, I think, medium size, which is very clear for them to see. And it just makes it. No. Yeah, I do a little cleanup. There's a scratch on the glass. I take that out, things like that. Make the number a little sharper. Yeah. And if I knew how to read the meter, I'd actually, no, just move the dials around. I should experiment with that one day, but with my luck, it'll go the other way.
How was that? One time I heard a certain program accept our.
Yes. Well, also their email account, his question was, there are certain email programs that want to accept large attachments. There's also certain email accounts that have a size limit on the attachments, period. So this is also helping you if you send out a bunch of pictures. Because when you don't have to do it one by one. When you say, here, let's do it. If I go grab these other 3, it's sizing all of those down, including this one that can't read for some reason. So it's doing it for all of the photos I'm attaching, not just the one. So it's a great way to throw in a bunch of photos and have it size them all down for that one email right off the bat. Okay, now we talked about doing it from the Finder, using the share feature, which will bring up the email. What if you compose a new email and you want to, like I said, you're starting with the email first and you want to add them. Well, there is the attach button, obviously, that will let you go find any attachment you want to attach. And by the way, you don't have to do them one by one. You can shift select multiple ones and attach them at the same time as a bonus tip.
What if they're not in order?
Okay, what if they're not in order? What if I want this one, and this one? Can't do it.
But I can drag it.
All right, if they're discontiguous selections, meaning like I just did, the 3 that aren't next to each other. So if they're next to each other, you can grab, you can hold down the shift key and just keep grabbing. So if I do shift, it'll just grab all the ones in between. If they're not in order, or I mean not next to each other, then it's command key. So if I want that one, and that one, just holding down the command key will let me do multiple selections that aren't next to each other.
Can I do that?
One at a time. Can I do that in iPhoto? Sure. Go ahead.
Can you do it from the bottom of the list?
No, it only works one way. It's very particular that way. Yes, you can do it from the bottom up.
Can you do it in the
Yes.
Okay. Of course, you can also take and marquee them.
Icon view? Yes, you can. But what if they're discontiguous? Ah.
I hold down command key and follow the one.
Ah. That works too. All right. Notice it says send Windows-friendly attachments. Who knows what that means?
It means that it removes Mac-specific metadata from the cache.
There are also characters and file names that are unfriendly on either platform. For example, in Mac OS, you can have a file name, I cringe when I don't even want to say this, but you can have a file name with a slash in it. Windows, that's not a good idea because the slash is the way they designate a path to a different folder. But what's the equivalent for Mac OS? Colon. Don't have a file name with a colon in it because the Mac OS uses a colon instead of a slash. So it's also stripping out unfriendly file name characters so that it doesn't screw up the person that you're sending it to. Now, one of the other quick tips that I'll do is, and by the way, I could have grabbed some pictures while I was there. Let's say I grab these, not the GIF. Let's do that. Okay. macOS, very friendly, shows me what the pictures are going to look like. But there is a tip that if you right-click it, for let's say, for example, you dropped in 20 pictures, and you're just having a hard time sifting through it all because you're trying to see other things in the email. Or, more importantly, maybe you want to see the name of the actual file you just put in there. So you can say, if you right-click on any of these photos, you can say View as Icon. And that will not render the picture, that will render it as the icon that you would have seen in the Finder. Shows me the file names, shows me the icon, shows me less clutter, takes up less space in the message, shows me the icon.
The size of the icon right now.
Can I increase the size of the icon in the mail message?
Yeah.
No. It is what it is.
When that's received, it'll show that same thing.
It depends.
When I send a picture out.
It depends.
It
Depends on their email client. His question was, well, when they receive it, will they receive the icons or will they receive the actual pictures? Depends on their email client, how their email client's set up.
A lot of times I send it, they say, well, send me an attachment. That is an attachment.
You know what I do in that case? By the way, so you will get Windows users because there's actually two ways to do it. What Mail is doing when I drag those pictures in and it shows me those pictures is it's actually making a more, and I'm forgetting the actual name of the formatting, but it's creating a more media-rich type email. So some Windows users will complain that, well, I see the pictures, but it's not an attachment. Like I need that, in other words, they're looking for this. They're looking for icons that they can drag or double click on or whatever and move over. And they don't know that they could just right click on the pictures and, by the way, and get to it, the same thing. But what you can do to kind of combat some of that is, number one, if you get, that's, okay, then number two, zip it. Compress it. Compress all three pictures. They don't get the benefit of seeing them in the email. They get an attachment. Done. How do you zip it? Why did I know that was coming? All right. So select the images or files or whatever it is you're sending. Right-click, compress. That will take whatever you've got selected in the Finder and make an archive.zip, which you can rename. So you can say, my 3 photos. All right, so let's get rid of those. And so now if I send them this, that is an attachment. There's no way that that's going to render because it's a zip file. And if they unzip it, they'll have the 3 pictures.
Do they have to have something special?
Windows has unzip built in, just like the Mac does. Her question was, do they need something specific to unzip it? And the answer is no. All right, that was the first way. The second way. The third way would be, because the first way was don't correspond with Windows users. Second way was compress them or zip them first. And the third way would be change the format. If you make it a plain text email under the format menu instead of rich text, and I haven't tried this lately, so let me see what happens. Let's see if it reverted the format. No, it didn't. So it put the photo in. Yeah, let's go back to large. And in theory, it should be sending that as an attachment now as opposed to something they will see rendered in their browser. But again, or their email client. It will depend on their email client. But rich text is the default. Plain text will give them probably even a more Windows-friendly email. Got it? It was worth it for just those 2 things. All those pictures you've been wanting to send. Okay. All right, I'm glad I could help. All right, moving on.
Quick question.
Quick question.
If you're sending to somebody who's on AOL, a lot of times things bounce back.
All right, I'm gonna have to go with Steve's quote on that one. Stop corresponding with people on AOL. All right. I actually do correspond with someone on AOL, and I think I've sent them attachments and I haven't heard any complaints. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say. Every person's different. Every circumstance is different. If you're running into problems with them,
Tell them to get a Gmail account, send it to them that way.
yeah.
The other one is the criteria that the AOL user sets up. And if they set up, they don't want this, they don't want that, it can only be this size, or so on and so forth. So it's not always AOL sometimes.
It's the user's preferences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and privacy concerns.
Right.
So all of them have their little.
Now, by the way, that perfect opportunity for another tip. If email's working for you, great, keep doing it. But in those rare situations where I just, for whatever reason, can't email something to someone, or maybe it's just too big to email, Dropbox. Dropbox gives you, nowadays, 2 gigs, 5 gigs for free, depending on what settings you turn on. So from 2 to 5 gigabytes for free. Once you create a Dropbox account, and I don't know if I have Dropbox set up on this computer or not. I mean, on this user or not, but let's see. Yeah, I don't have Dropbox set up on this user. But once you have a Dropbox account set up and you drag a file, let's say a zip file or something that's too large to email into that folder, you can right-click on it and get a link to send to that person. So now you're not sending the attachment. You're sending a link for them to download it. And that eliminates all of this attachment stuff you run into via email. So in the case of your one AOL person that just can't seem to get what you send them, Dropbox it to them.
What's the maximum file size?
Maximum, I don't think there is one. I think it's the limit of the space of the Dropbox account, space you have. And you can buy additional space, right? I'm using 250 gigs myself. Go ahead, we'll come around.
That's probably one of those, but
You send it, that's another one, yep.
there's another one for large files.
So there's a website called yousendit.com, which I don't use because I use Dropbox, but I get files from them at times. Yousendit.com is designed for this specific purpose. So I guess again, I'm new to this, so I haven't used this before, other than receiving. You set up a account, and then you will be able to you will be able to upload your large attachments to this website and send the link to whoever you want it to. Now, is it free, period, or is it just a free trial?
I think up to a certain
Size, okay.
Usage is free. I've never had to pay, but for instance, a year or 2 years ago, I did a keynote presentation relative to a family event. I had to send it to my brother in the Seattle area, and I used to send it when he was fine.
Okay.
So,
And the other, like I said, the other one is Dropbox.com. So you send it, Dropbox, and there's Adobe Send Now, or Acrobat Send Now. There's all kinds of these services set up to allow you to send files. Go ahead.
It's popped up on the screen that the way you look at use it is now called email.
Oh, could be.
Right up there.
Yep, YouSend It is now Hightail. So we know it as YouSend It, but it looks like they changed names or ownership. Go ahead.
When you're talking about sending attachments, people complaining about them, one thing that the mail program does, if you're using the attachment button, it'll pop that in wherever your cursor happens to be.
Right.
Or in the middle of the sentence. And one thing, and I don't remember where it's buried, if it's in preps or settings or whatever, but there is a way to force attachments to always be bottom of your texting, so they're always at the bottom of your message. And I found that to be kind of a saver, complaining about finding pictures in the middle of the messages.
Did everyone hear that? All right. When you use the attachment button in mail, it's going to drop the attachment wherever your cursor is. So just be weary of that when you're saying, here's the attachment, return, attach, so that they actually see where it's being placed. So that could be part of the problem, is just where you're attaching the file. If they're not seeing it or not scrolling down to it.
There is a way to force it.
And I don't either.
Yeah.
You said there's a way to force it, but we don't remember where it is. So I'm installing Dropbox on this user with a new account, so it's not going to pull over all the other Dropbox stuff from my other one. I already have an account. Detroit at Meeting account. I just typed the wrong one in. There we go. And here's my 2 gigs for free. Typical settings. Optional, so I'll continue. No, I don't need a tour. Open my Dropbox folder now. So now I have Dropbox on this computer and 2 gigs of space to use. Now, it's just a folder on my computer. So it's not a 2 gig partition. It's not 2 gigs of something else. It's saying I can put whatever I want in that folder up to 2 gigs worth that will sync to Dropbox. So now if I want to send that attachment of all of this stuff, except the zip that's already there. So if I want to zip all of this, compress, and then drop it in the Dropbox folder, Dropbox is now syncing whatever I just put in it up to the Dropbox cloud. When that is done syncing, and I probably don't have to wait for it, but when it is done, that will turn into a green check mark. And then, and I should have looked to see how big that was. Instead of getting carried away. 7 megabytes, okay. One file, 26 seconds left.
What if, in Dropbox, if you have like several different people that you already have, sending a file to this person, you know, last week I sent pictures to that person, how do you separate the information among all your listings, the different people? How do you separate that one or two to the specific individual? Like you don't want them access to all that.
Okay, so let me answer that. This question was about having multiple files, sending them to multiple users, who gets access to what. So when I go to my Dropbox folder, there's the Getting Started PDF that they put there, and here's the file that I put there that's now synced. When I right-click on this file, and I say Share via Dropbox link, it just copied a link to my clipboard, and now if I go to Mail, create a new mail account, and paste in that link. Yes, I know, thank you. Yes, I know, thank you. Paste in that link. Only the people that I send that link to, and whoever they send it to, will be able to download that file. So I'm not giving them access to anything else in my Dropbox folder but that one file, and only via this one link. So if I send it to you, and as long as you don't share with anybody else, you're the only one that downloads that file out of that folder. And you don't get to see anything else in that folder. If you pass it on to everyone else in the room gets to download that one file, but they don't see anything else in that folder. So that's how I handle attachments that are...
I mean, on that, it shows that it's a weird
And it's a weird name that no one's going to guess. So it's not just archive zip Terry White or Mac Group, it's this name that it randomly chose.
But you can also set up a shared folder.
Yes, you can set up a shared folder for people that you're going to work on back and forth. So for example, if I want to not have to send a link to that file every single time, and I want other people to give me things too, I can create a folder in here called, let's say, Mac Group. And now that that folder has been created, I can right-click on it and I can say, share this folder. Now that's different. That's giving access to the people I choose to that folder and whatever's in it. So it's going to log me in. It's going to ask me who do I want to share it to. That's going to make me verify my email first. Okay, let's go to mail.
Terry, I have a really dumb beginner question. How are you?
Holding down the control key and click, or on my trackpad, I've got it set up to 2 fingers click. Control, click with 1 button or 1 finger, or you can set your trackpad to be if you just put 2 fingers on the trackpad, that is a right click. All right, why am I not getting this? MacGroup-Detroit at me.com. Try one more time.
While you're waiting, Terry, you could mention that they can get read-only access to the whole folder as well.
You just did. So to repeat what he just said, you can give read-only access to a whole folder as well. Although mail didn't get it, the website did. Okay, now back to our story. So now that I've verified it, it says this folder is empty, and I can now share a link to this folder to as many people as I want. So if I send this to Terry at my other email address, send it, and I just got the email, by the way. I can now join that folder. Waiting for it to sign in. You would think it would let me do it with the app, but it's making me go to the website. But anyway, I can join the folder, and then I can, if the folder's set up that way, I can put things in that folder, because that folder will now appear on my computer in my Dropbox folder as Terry White. Whatever I put into it will get synced up to Dropbox and down to the Mac Group Dropbox folder. Whatever, so it's like having the files on both hard drives synced to the cloud, and whatever you do in one, those changes get synced to the other. You take a file out, it's taken out in both places. So it's literally a virtual copy of anything in that folder on everyone's computer that you share that to. So anyone can go in and make changes to the documents, anyone can go in and add things, anyone can go in and delete things if you have it set up that way. So that's saying, I want an ongoing relationship of working with you as opposed to, here's a file I'm sending you this one time. That's the difference. And we are out of time. So did you learn anything today?
Yeah.
Now, by the way, let's say that I'm in a shared folder and someone adds a file. I don't want them to have to send me an email saying, hey, I've added a file to the Dropbox folder. They can, but more importantly, Dropbox will notify me with a little pop-up menu that a file's been added to the folder. And then if I click the notification fast enough, I can actually go right to that folder and see the file that just got added or changed or updated. So it's I love Dropbox for all the things that Dropbox does. Very cool. And the fact that you get 2 gigs for free or 5 gigs if you turn on the camera upload feature makes it great. I pay for it. I actually have I think it's the 250 gig plan where I use it as my documents folder. So that way my documents folder is on all my computers. Yep, ready.
Remind people that that's not really a backup.
It is, depends on if you have the pack right feature, it is a backup.
Yeah, but that's separate.
But by default, it is not a backup. Because if you delete something out of Dropbox without knowing, let's say you accidentally trash a file, it's trashing that file everywhere, including the cloud, all the computers, and then 2 weeks later you say, well, where's this file? It's not backed up, it's gone, because you deleted it. So first thing, Carol Goodell, who got us if you were here last month, you got free passes to the Jobs movie, which we all had a pre-opening night to go see. She also brought, if I hold it up right side up, there we go. She also brought the official miniature posters. So she has them back there, you can grab one on your way out.